All right, well, welcome to our autumn equinox. We'll talk about names in a moment. Roundtable. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves.
I'm
Yeah.
Robin. I'm in Northeast Ohio. Anything else you guys want to know?
All right. Welcome, Robin. Well, yeah.
Well, you obviously, audience can't hear me. So, yeah.
I'm Mark. I'm in Northern California.
I'm Michael or Mihal, and I'm in Iowa.
And I'm Yeka in New Mexico. So when we're recording this, it's a little bit before the equinox that's coming up. But this is a really interesting holiday. So we're going to get into talking about what that means to all of us and what we call it, what sorts of things we do, and kind of what's happening for our different climates. Yeah.
Yeah. So where shall we start?
Let's start with names. I think that's a good place.
Okay.
I just call it the equinox. That makes it easy. That's what it is. And we're all here in the northern hemisphere, so we're going into winter. But of course, everybody in the southern hemisphere is going to be going into spring. Or if you're in the equator, then the whole spring summer thing doesn't really make a lot of sense anyways. So
I kind of have this romantic notion of the harvest. So I just think calling it harvest or harvest home is fantastic, and I like the harvest moon. I just think there's something really beautiful about this time of year. And I think harvest is a really evocative word for it. So I'm pretty happy with that.
That's what I use too. And I agree. There's all this sort of romantic, kind of antique tinged, wonderful imagery that goes with this time, like hay wagons and scarecrows, and just all this sort of, I don't know, kind of 19th, 18th century sort of feel to the thing. So I like calling it harvest. To me, that's meaningful.
Robin, what is it for you?
I like autumn equinox or fall equinox. I until about 30 seconds ago would have used the M word, which Michael's kind of gonna fill us in on the M word.
we should probably just. So we're talking about Mabon, which is a pretty recent invention. I mean, it's a name from Welsh mythology, but it was only in the 70s that it was acquired to name this holiday.
Yeah, by one dude who also named Ostara and Letha, we should note. That was Aidan Kelly. And so there is no antique provenance of any of those names. Not in the relation to the holidays, anyway.
Right. Well, he's a figure from the Mabinogion, but I don't remember him having anything to do with the equinox or fall or anything like that.
No, it was like he pulled a name out of a hat.
Well,
I don't get it.
I guess so. From my understanding, that you've got Germanic names, you've got names from Celtic countries as well, but yet there was no Welsh names of any of these holidays, and that was one of the reasons why he went with Mabon, because he was trying to get that culture into the pantheon, I suppose. But my understanding, Welsh people, when they hear that this is what's happening, there is a little bit of confusion and kind of annoyance as well, that this is nothing to do with Welsh culture or identity.
Right. So, well, because it's not even like a particularly, like he's not even one of like the big figures. It's just a figure from the stories, and it's just like, okay, well, here's this one. It's a cool sounding name, but I mean, why? Why is it being used for the fall equinox?
there's only one thing that I like about that whole historical fact, that he made up these names and now they've got all this traction and all these people practicing Wicca that are using them and stuff. And that is that at the time that he did that, there was a full-on acknowledgement that we're making this up.
Mhm.
That this is a re-envisioning, a reimagining of paganism for the modern era, right?
Mhm.
Sometime after that, this whole story about how this was this lineage from far back that extended into the modern times really took over. It was certainly very present when I got involved in the 80s. And it wasn't until some good scholarship got done in the 90s that it was kind of generally disproved that was the case. So I do like the fact that he was going, well, we don't have a name for this, let's make one up. But I don't like the name.
But it's funny because do people feel like it needs like an antique feel for it to be authentic? Is that what's happening?
Could be.
Because
Yeah. There's probably even a formal name for it if you're to look in like a book about fallacies, but the like the fallacy of the old, or the fallacy of the antique, that just because something is old makes it more valid.
Yes, it's called the appeal to tradition.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, and Ronald Hutton wrote a lot about that in one of his books too, about like all of these secret societies. Like the Masons were trying to make that same argument around the time that Gerald Gardner was like creating Wicca. Is they were saying like, well, we're descended from the Knights Templar, so made sense to make up a lineage, I guess. Everyone else was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really true. And when you look at the early Wicca that Gerald Gardner published, it's full of Freemasonry and Golden Dawn stuff and sort of secret society stuff from the 19th century.
Mm.
But it's still a really cool holiday.
Yeah. And
let's talk about that.
well, and even though this kind of wheel of the year structure is a very new invention, it is pulling on and drawing from things that we of humans have been doing for millennia, and recognizing, wow, these shifts that are happening and coming from agricultural cultures, the harvest, there's something really special and beautiful about that. And the changing of the leaves is just magical. We don't have a lot here, but I was just driving with my kids, and down in the canyons we have big cottonwoods, and they're starting to change. And most of our other trees are all evergreens and they'll stay green for the whole year, but those ones, they're starting to change, and they notice it right away. They go, look, the leaves, they're changing. And it's just, and you can just taste it in the air. There's just something really magical about it.
Yeah, I have recently kind of realized, I feel like fall in Ohio, it's as much like the trees are like, oh, it's cold, the light's going down, now I'm gonna drop my leaves. It feels more now like it's just such a long, hot summer, and August tends to be really hot around here, that it's almost like the trees are just like, I have no more water left, I'm dried out, we're just giving up on these leaves. And I've been trying to notice like the patterns in, like, is it starting at the bottom and the leaves that get the less light, or is it the ones at the top, which you think would be like the most dried out? So I've been trying to pay more attention to that pattern to see if my observations hold any water. But
I wonder if it depends on the tree species too, and the individual.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like how much water they're getting from the ground, because that can vary a lot around here. So
Oh, the other thing about this time of year for us here is the green chili. The green chili is being roasted, and that's something that it happens in my area and other areas of the Southwest, and there's just the smell carries, it literally carries for miles, and you go, because people will be roasting it on the side of the road, and you go and get your big bags of and stock it up in the freezer for the rest of the year. And there's just like that's the smell of fall.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember hearing a news story that like New Mexico had decided to make it like their official smell was the smell of rice and green chili. And so I lived in New Mexico for a while, and like it totally makes sense. I think everybody else was like, why would you have an official smell or a state smell? But it makes sense because it's so distinct. It's so good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, even if you don't eat the chili yourself, right? Just the smell of it, you just can't help but appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's autumn like for you, Michael?
I was just going to read you a little bit from my favorite book, which is celebrating the Irish festivals. So this is my go-to for everything. But it's interesting. You've probably heard of the Cailleach, which is potentially an Irish goddess, but it's a word that has so many meanings. It's unbelievable. Like it's actually a word for like a small room in a cottage as well, and you can also use it to. It's a word for witch as well, and a variety of other things. And it has a very particular meaning in this paragraph I'm going to read to you. So, in rural Ireland, the harvest was an occasion that brought whole communities together to carry out essential work while the weather was right. There was always some urgency about the work and a great community feeling. This was one of the few times in the agricultural year when everybody had to work together. The last sheaf left in the fields was known as the Cailleach, or the hag. In some areas, it was considered an honor to cut this sheaf, while in other areas it was thought an ill omen. Sometimes there was a contest where reapers tossed their reaping hooks at the last sheaf. Once cut, the sheaf was plaited or bound in an ornamental fashion and carried to the farmer with great ceremony. The farmer was expected to provide a reward in the form of a great feast or harvest home. The harvest home was usually held in a barn, and the Cailleach was given pride of place. The barn was the only building large enough to hold all those who had helped with the harvest. The feast was followed by music and dancing, led by the girl who tied the last sheaf and the eldest son of the farmer. So there you go. Kind of, you see a lot of beautiful sheafs that have been like woven into harvest bows and things like that as well. So it's in a great time of folk customs and traditions as well. So in harvest for me is more of like it's a whole season. So it starts in the month of August, which in Irish is Lunasa. That's the word for August as well. And then September is Manfor, which means mid-harvest, and Derifor is October, which means the end of the harvest. So it's kind of just a continual season of harvesting as various crops come into fruiting. So I also love the idea of the harvest moon, and I always this time of year always reminds me of the Neil Young song Harvest Moon, which is a very romantic, slow, like waltzing song. And the idea of having harvest parties and balls is just a beautiful sense for me. And then in Japan, it's time for moon viewing. A lot of people traditionally, I don't know about modern times, but there would have been moon viewing parties for the harvest moon. And there's a particular kind of grass called Suzuki grass. I don't know if you've seen this, but a few of our neighbors have it growing, and it's kind of cool seeing it grow at this time of year, and it's quite big. And I know on like holiday cards and in images from this time of year in Japan, you have the big full moon for the harvest moon with this grass kind of coming up the side. So I like when I'm walking at night, I like to kind of walk past the grass in such a way that I'm kind of seeing the moon from me in behind it.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, there's something about the long, warm evenings. It's okay that it's not light anymore, but it's still warm. And that moon is just amazing in September. There's just something really, really remarkable about it. Where I am, it's the grape harvest. I live in an area with a lot of vineyards, and so suddenly there's all these trucks all over the road, and there's all this work happening, and the whole place smells like fermenting grape juice everywhere for a period of about 3 weeks, and then it's over. Everything's in vats and it's all fermenting and it's doing its thing. But the new vintages get released at this time as well. So last year's white wines and the red wines from 3 years ago or 2 years ago get released now. So there's new wine to drink and things to check out, find out how good 2 years ago was, as a vintage.
Mm.
There are a lot of kind of harvest parties that relate to the grape crush as well.
Mm.
Nice. So, go
go
on,
ahead.
Mark. I was
Well,
going to lead us into another topic, so if to continue.
Well, I think about like winter vegetables and, it's not, the tomatoes are pretty well run out by now. I mean, they're still being produced, but they have black spots on them and stuff because we've had little bits of rain and, dew in the morning and stuff like that. But the winter vegetables are really pouring out of the gardens now. So squashes and pumpkins and all that kind of stuff. It's just very evocative of the season. My location is like yours, Yucca, in that we don't have those huge deciduous tree forests, with cold night temperatures that turn them fiery red and stuff. But we do have, some deciduous trees and like sweet ambers and liquid ambers and sweet gum trees and things like that. And the colors are just so stunning. And when you start to see the edges of the trees turn, you're like, oh, there it is. Summer's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have some aspen stands up in the mountains that you can see from the distance. And there's one particular, it's mostly this beautiful yellow orangey, but there's one stand that's red, like right in the middle. And it just makes me so happy every time I see it because everything all around it, yellow, and then red. You could just see it from just miles and miles away. So.
That is something.
Oh, go ahead,
Michael.
You can finish your thought, Mark. Go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if you thought that was genetic or is it temperature? Because my understanding is that colder temperatures lead to the red color rather than the yellow color. And I wonder if there's a microclimate.
It's an interesting question because that's with aspens, they tend to actually be one individual. Right. So I always assumed that there was just a different individual in there, but it would be interesting to look. It's the same spot every year. Maybe it's a little, like a little valley that's, interacting differently. I'd really have to think about that. I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is it possible there's just another deciduous tree growing in that one?
Oh, it's definitely the aspen. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Because I've gone up to visit that one. So.
During my my presentation on focuses during our web weaving conference, I was just trying to give a variety of different ideas for what focuses can be, because they don't just have to be a shelf on which you put things. And one of the options I said was maybe your focus is a direction. And as an example of a direction, I thought it would be kind of cool to face towards the biggest aspen in the world.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of cool that you're like, and I think it would be a kind of cool pilgrimage to make, to go and visit Pando, because it's like the largest organism in the world, basically. I don't know if you know the specifics of it, Yucca, or any.
I don't remember how many acres, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Pando is the Latin for I spread, because it just keeps spreading and spreading. So I think it would be a really cool pilgrimage if you were to do that, to go and visit this grove and experience this huge organism. There was a really cool Science Friday episode about Pando, and they actually put microphones in the root system
Hmm.
So you can actually hear sounds coming from deep up in the canopy all the way down into the roots and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not remembering exactly where it's in the northwest, right? Is it
I think it's in Utah, if I remember correctly.
it's Utah? Okay. Okay, so the north I must be thinking of there's a big mushroom
There's a
also
giant honey mushroom.
up, yeah. That's like
Yeah,
Oregon or someplace like that, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's also on the list of like incredibly huge organisms.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just the ones we know of. There's probably more
Yeah.
that we haven't discovered. So what kind of themes in addition or alongside of harvest does the equinox have for you?
I thought we could talk about what we did for our online ritual last year
Hmm.
for this time of year. So September 29th is Michaelmas, which is a Christian holiday where Saint Michael is famous for slaying a dragon. And so, as Atheopagans, we thought, well, let's nourish our inner dragons. Let's not kill any dragons. Let's nourish our dragons. So we had a dragon themed online ritual, and I thought it was a lot of fun.
People loved it. They
Yeah.
really loved it. It was
Mhm.
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
We drew dragons, and we watched the Homestar Runner thing about Trogdor the Burninator. um, so we did many dragon related things. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be. I think it would be cool if we did that again this year, incorporating dragons, because I think it's just dragons are cool. So let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're cooler than the association that I have, which is old people.
Oh,
I I tend to think of the wheel of the year as like the arc of a human life.
Mm-hmm.
So the fall is the time of the elderly, when you harvest, when you look back on all that's been accomplished, when you have a time to reflect. And then of course the next is Hallows, which is death and decomposition and recomposition, then leading into the winter solstice. So for me, I like to have each of these holidays be a time when you can celebrate a particular segment of the community and really appreciate them and recognize, what they offer. And so for me, it's elderly people for this particular holiday.
I think elderly are pretty awesome. Put them on par with dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elderly dragons. Those are the really wise
Oh,
ones.
watch out, CR20s, right? Um, Robin?
I love the association of harvest and then like feasting. It almost feels like, human, like bears have this, like right now they're in hyperphagia, they're eating as many calories as possible. And I feel like humans kind of go through that phase too. It's in some ways, like, like some people are like, this is all about pumpkin spice, this is my season, this is my moment. Um, and I love those. So like I just make food a big part of my practice. And I feel a little bit out of touch with it right now, just because my garden did not do well this year. So I don't have that like seasonality of like, going out to the garden and picking whatever. But yeah, like just thinking about where food comes from and how it gets to you. It's always something that I found really moving part of my practice. So yeah, and just that like gratitude and Thanksgiving, even though that won't be for a while yet, but yeah.
Yeah, a big harvest meal is definitely, that's like the ritual to me for this time of year. It's like get together, eat a bunch of, seasonal vegetables and, just be together. It really is kind of pagan Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And just like to me it's so, because like food is something that you like take in, it becomes part of you. And that's why there's just like that really strong spiritual connection there.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is a time that our local pagan group does a food drive because of the harvest, and it seems like a lot of food banks need a lot of food more than ever. There's seems like a bit of a crisis right now. So
Mm.
I think it's a time to consider that, yeah, helping out. What's
Mhm.
cool is our library, I'm sure, I don't know if this is probably most libraries at this point, but there is a food bank in our library. So you walk in the door and there's fridges there so people can just grab things immediately. Mhm.
Yeah, our libraries do it like distribution programs where like everybody can, they're still kind of trying to be COVID safe about it, so it's like a drive-up distribution. And they just drive up and they'll put food right in your car. Yeah, but we partner a lot with our local food banks, so.
Something we try and do every year as well is we drive up to northeast Iowa, right up along the banks of the Mississippi, and then there's a national park there. Or I think it's a state park rather. The effigy, it's a national monument. There you go. It's the Effigy Mounds National Monument,
Oh,
and it's quite amazing seeing these beautiful mounds that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they kind of, when the leaves are falling from the trees, then that you can kind of see them in better clarity. And then there's something really beautiful about the Mississippi with just red and orange leaves all along it. When you first kind of, it takes about 40 minutes to walk the trail all the way to see the Mississippi at the end. But it's just, you just realize how massive a river it is, and how important it is. And just beholding it right there and eagles flying over it, and it's a really cool thing to see.
wow.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else people would like to share or talk about with this time of year, this holiday?
I would be interested if any of our viewers would like to give a defense of Mabon. I'd be interested in if anybody's watching this and they really want to use Mabon, I'd like to hear what it is about that word that really resonates with them.
Well, I do have to say I'm a little biased, but I like the sound of the word.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. But I would invite one to go ahead and pick up a copy of the Mabinogion
Yeah, that might be an interesting, that could be kind of a cool ritual to do a group reading of it at this time of year.
Yeah. Or select portions.
It's quite long.
It's quite a bit. There's and you might consider getting an audio copy to start with, if you're not familiar with the language, because some of the sounds are a little bit different than English sounds are. So yeah.
Is it a book you've read yourself?
Yeah. Just all of the names, right? Okay. Which is the spelling is more similar to English than, say, Irish spelling is to English, but there's still, the double L's and the CHs and the, sounds that are a little unfamiliar at first. So, yeah. All right.
Well, I hope that all of our listeners have a wonderful harvest and feel like this has been a fruitful year and has brought them many good things, and that now they can take a rest, because that's what's coming up, is the dark time and the resting time.
And thank you everyone for joining us. This was very lovely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.